Hey guys, we're picking up today with talking about the Russian Civil War and what happens next, the new economic policy. The Bolsheviks simply call themselves the Communist Party. The Communists also had to face counter revolutionaries from the aristocracy and the military. By 1921, Lenin was in control of the country. The Communists also established control over Russia's empire, losing only Poland, Finland, and Lithuania. Lenin created the new economic policy, which lasted from 1921 to 1924. Years of warfare, revolution, and mismanagement had ruined the Russian economy. Beginning in 1921, Lenin's new economic policy helped to restore production by relaxing government controls and allowing a return to market economies. This policy was regarded as a temporary measure that would be superseded as the Soviet Union built a modern, socialist, industrialist economy by extracting resources from the peasants to pay for industrialization. When Lenin died in January of 1924, his associates struggled for power. The two main contenders were Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Stalin filled the bureaucracy with his supporters, expelled Trotsky, and forced him to flee the country. Stalin succeeded Lenin, and his slogan was socialism in one country. Stalin would reign from 1926 to 1953. In 1928, Stalin started his first 5-year plan focused on rapid industrialization, no matter the human costs or other. Stalin was successful, and within 10 years, the Soviet Union had become the fastest growing industry in the world. In Russia, Allied intervention and civil war extended the fighting for another 3 years beyond the end of World War I. By 1921, the Communists had defeated most of their enemies, and in 1922, the Soviet Republic of Ukraine and Russia merged to create the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, aka the USSR. There we go. So, we're going to switch a little bit and talk about China and Japan. And contrasting destinies is our topic of choice. We'll start with social and economic change. In the first decades of the 20th century, China was plagued by rapid population growth, an increasing unfavorable ratio of population to arable land. Landlords and tax collectors who took advantage of the people on their lands, and frequent devastating floods of the Yellow River. Above the peasantry, Chinese society was divided among many groups: landowners, wealthy merchants, and foreigners, whose luxurious lives aroused the resentment of the educated, young, urban Chinese. Japan had few natural resources and very little arable land. While not troubled by floods, Japan was subject to other natural calamities. In Japan, industrialization and economic growth aggravated social tensions between westernized urbanites and traditionalists, and between the immensely wealthy Zaibatsu and the poor farmers, who still comprised half the population. Japan's prosperity depended on foreign trade, and this made Japan much more vulnerable than China to swings in the world economy. China's defeat and humiliation at the hands of the international force in the Boxer Affair of 1900 led to many Chinese students to conclude that China needed a revolution to overthrow the Qing and modernize the country. In 1911, the last Qing emperor abdicated. Sun Zhongshan, otherwise known more famously as Sun Yat-sen, declared the Republic of China. When a regional army unit mutinied in 1911, Sun Yat-sen's Revolutionary Alliance formed an assembly and elected Sun as president of China. But to avoid a civil war, the presidency was then turned over to a powerful general, Yuan Shikai, who rejected democracy and ruled as an autocrat. Sun turned his attention thereafter to organizing his followers as the GUOMINDANG. The Japanese joined the Allied side in World War I and benefited from an economic boom as demand of their products rose. Japan used the war as an opportunity to conquer the German colonies in the northern Pacific and on the Chinese coast, and to further extend Japanese influence in China by forcing the Chinese government to accede to many of the conditions presented in a document called the 21 Demands. Pardon me, guys. All right. At the Paris Peace Conference, the great powers allowed Japan to retain control over seized German former colonies in China. This sparked protests in Beijing and in many other parts of China. China's regional generals, also called the warlords, supported their armies through plunder and arbitrary taxation, so that China grew poor while only the treaty ports prospered. On May 4th, 1919, Chinese university students demonstrated in Beijing to protest Japan's imperialism in what came to be known as the May 4th movement. The Republic of China still faced an imperialist Japan, which controlled Taiwan and Manchuria. Yan broke with the Republic in 1916 and tried to establish his own imperial dynasty. The GUOMINDANG was rebuilt in Guangzhou by Sun and his brother-in-law Jiang Jiechi, also known as Chiang Kai-shek. In 1921, a Chinese Communist Party was created in Shanghai. Sun Yat-sen tried to make a comeback in Canton in the 1920s by reorganizing his Kuomintang party along Leninist lines and by welcoming members of the newly created Chinese Communist Party. Sun's successor, Chiang Kai-shek, crushed the regional warlords in 1927. Mao Zedong, a communist leader, argued that peasants would be the way to a socialist revolution. Chiang Kai-shek then split with and decimated the Communist Party and embarked on an ambitious plan of top-down industrial modernization. However, Chiang's government was staffed with corrupt opportunists, not by competent administrators, and China remained mired in poverty. And it is this split that we'll talk about later, how Mao rises to take over the Communist Party and how Chiang Kai-shek must flee, and how this will end up leading to the one China policy that we use in today. But we're not there yet. All right, the new Middle East and the mandate system. Outside of Europe, the post-war settlements created the mandate system. Instead of being given their independence, the former German colonies and the Ottoman territories were given to the great powers as mandates. Class C mandates were ruled as colonies, while Class B mandates were to be ruled under the League of Nations supervision. In Africa, the experiences of the war had introduced nationalism and self-determination. In South Africa, the African National Congress argued for the right to vote for Western-educated African property owners. More Africans went to Europe and the United States to study after the war. They came back with more ideas of self-determination and liberal beliefs. The Arab-speaking territories of the former Ottoman Empire were Class A mandates, a category that was defined to lead the Arabs to believe that they had been promised independence. In practice, Britain took control of Palestine, Iraq, and Transjordan, while France took Syria and Lebanon as its mandates. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire led to conflicts between national interests. Britain made conflicting promises after the war that caused problems in the Middle East. In the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the British promised to create a national homeland in Palestine for Jews. After the war, Britain used the mandate system to reconcile these promises. Arabs particularly resented the mandate system. Zionism had increased in popularity among U.S. and European Jews during the war. Britain also had economic problems at the end of the war, thus refusing their ability to let go of the colonies. The rise of modern Turkey. Ottoman rule continued until it was defeated in World War I, and Istanbul was occupied by the Allies. When the Republic of Turkey was born in 1923, after the War of Independence, Kemal Ataturk moved the capital of Turkey to Ankara. At the end of the war, the Ottoman Empire was at the point of collapse, with French, British, Italian, and Greek forces occupying Constantinople and parts of Anatolia. In 1919, Mustafa Kemal, aka Ataturk, formed a nationalist government and reconquered Anatolia and the area around Constantinople in 1922. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was an army officer who helped to found the Republic of Turkey, serving as its first president from 1923 until his death in 1938. His surname, Ataturk, means father of the Turks or father of Turkey, was granted to him in 1934. It's actually forbidden to any other person to be in Turkey to be called this. It is a law by the Turkish parliament. Ataturk was a career military officer in the Ottoman Empire. He rose to the rank of general during World War I, and he actually was at the Battle of Gallipoli. Following the empire's defeat and subsequent dissolution, he led the Turkish national movement in the Turkish War of Independence. Having established a provisional government in Ankara, he defeated the forces sent by the Allies, eventually leading the victory to the Turkish War of Independence. Kemal was an outspoken modernizer who declared Turkey to be a secular republic. He introduced European laws, replaced the Arabic alphabet with the Latin alphabet, and attempted to westernize the Turkish family, the roles of women, and even Turkish clothing and headgear. His reforms spread quickly in the urban areas, but they encountered strong resistance and resentment in the countryside, where Islamic traditions remained strong. Under his leadership, thousands of new schools were built. Primary education was made free and compulsory, and women were given equal civil and political rights, while the burden of taxation on peasants was reduced. Among the Arab people, the thinly disguised colonialism of the mandate system set off protests and rebellions. At the same time, Middle Eastern society underwent significant changes. The population grew by 50% from 1914 to 1939. Major cities doubled in size, and the urban and merchant class adopted Western ideas, customs, and lifestyles. The Maghreb, which is Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, was dominated by the French army and by French settlers, who owned the best lands and monopolized government jobs and businesses. Arabs and Berbers remained poor and suffered from discrimination. The British allowed Iraq to become independent under King Faisal, who was the leader of the Arab Revolt, but maintained a significant military and economic influence. France sent thousands of troops to crush nationalistic uprisings in Lebanon and Syria, and Britain declared Egypt to be independent in 1922, but retained control of its alliance with King Farouk. In the Palestine Mandate, the British tried to limit the wave of Jewish immigrants that began in 1920, but only succeeded in alienating both Jews and Arabs. All right, we are going to stop there, and that is the end of our series on World War I, the Russian Revolution, and the various outcomes of World War I. If you have any questions, you know what to do. Send me an email. Otherwise, have a great night, guys. Next week, we start World War II. Have a great night, guys. Cheers.